My mother went blind and urgently needed a corneal transplant, and we finally got to a suitable donor. The day before the surgery, my husband, Adrian, the head of ophthalmology, gave the opportunity to someone else. He stayed up all night by another girl's bedside and said to me, "Clara, that girl is only 18 years old. She needs the light more than Mom does." Later, I found out that the girl was his mentor's daughter. To repay his gratitude, he not only gave up the cornea but also misappropriated the 300,000 yuan surgery fee prepared for my mother. When I found him, he was accompanying the girl in the garden, practicing walking. "Adrian," I said calmly, "my mother couldn't wait any longer. She fell from the building this morning and is gone." My mother fell from the third-floor window when my husband, Adrian, was in the hospital's back garden. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, shining on his handsome profile. He carefully supported a girl with a gauze over her eyes, teaching her how to adapt to walking in the dark. "Serena, don't be afraid, I'm here. 1 step, 2 steps, yes, that's it. Soon you'll be able to see." His voice was a tenderness I had never heard before, a tenderness like a poison blade, stabbing into my heart. The girl's name was Serena. The pure white gauze covering her eyes, and the corneas underneath, which were about to regain their sight, should have been my mother's. Yesterday was my mother's scheduled surgery day. But what I received was not news of a successful surgery, but Adrian's cold notification. "Clara, the cornea was given to Serena. Mom's body can wait a little longer." I clutched a piece of paper in my hand. The edges of the death certificate, still warm from the printer, were curled up by my fingernails. I walked over step by step, my high heels clicking on the gravel path, making clack-clack sounds. Each step was like stepping on my broken heart. The air in the garden was good, mixed with the fragrance of grass and earth. But all I smelled was the cold breath of death. Serena was gently leaning her head on Adrian's shoulder, her voice soft and sweet, like it contained honey. "Adrian G, when I get better, the first thing I want to see is you." "Okay." Adrian's promise was firm and decisive. What a touching scene. I stopped in front of them, my shadow engulfing them. I spoke calmly, interrupting this blinding scene. "Adrian." He looked up at the sound, and when he saw it was me, his brows furrowed instinctively, and a hint of impatience flashed in his eyes. "Clara, what are you doing here? Didn't I say that Serena needs someone to take care of her? You go back and take care of Mom, I'll be back later." The matter-of-fact tone in his voice was like a heavy hammer, slamming hard into my heart. Take care of Mom? He still had the nerve to mention my mother? My mother couldn't wait any longer. I looked at him, feeling like my voice was coming from another world, hollow and numb. "She fell from the building this morning and is gone." The air froze instantly. The color drained from Adrian's face the moment he heard those words. He was stunned, as if struck by lightning, frozen in place. He staggered forward, his lips trembling violently, unable to utter a single complete word. "Cla. Clara, you. What did you say?" Serena, next to him, clutched his arm tightly, her voice filled with just the right amount of panic and innocence. "Adrian G, what's wrong? Who is this sister? What is she saying?" I ignored her and simply slapped the thin piece of paper onto Adrian's stiff chest like throwing away trash. Every word on the death certificate was like a red-hot knife, branding his heart, and branding my bones and blood. I said, "Your favor has been paid off with my mother's life." I clearly remembered what he told me the day before the surgery. "Clara, Serena is only 18 years old. Her life has just begun. She needs light more than our mother. My benefactor has given me a second life. I can't stand by and watch her die." The benefactor he spoke of was Victor, the former president of the municipal hospital, and Serena's father. And my mother, in his eyes, seemed like just a cold number that could be sacrificed at any time, and could wait. Adrian's body trembled violently. He stared at me, his eyes almost overflowing with shock, fear, and regret. He tried to grab my hand, his voice broken and sobbing. "No. No, how could Mom?" I abruptly took a step back, avoiding his touch as if it were something filthy. My gaze was as cold as the Siberian ice. "Because she couldn't see. Because you gave the only chance she had to see the light to another woman." The floor at home was slippery. She wanted to go out on the balcony for some air, and she just fell down. "Adrian, are you satisfied?" I nailed his crime to the ground with every word. After saying that, I didn't look at him again and turned to leave. Behind me came Serena's contrived exclamation, and Adrian's heart-wrenching, desperate cries. Clara! Clara! Those sounds could no longer stir the slightest ripple in my heart. All I knew was that from this day on, Adrian, Serena, Victor, all of you owe me more than just a pair of eyes. It's a life. I will make you pay this debt with your whole lives. The funeral was simple. Not many people came. Just some relatives, or people who were only there out of respect for Adrian. The funeral hall was all white, with mournful music playing softly. I stood numbly in front of my mother's portrait, wearing a black dress, looking at her gentle smile in the photo, my heart aching. Adrian was also wearing a sharp black suit, with dark circles under his eyes, looking exhausted. He stood in front of the mourning hall, bowing and thanking every relative and friend who came to offer condolences, trying to play the role of a grief-stricken good son-in-law. Seeing me come in, he immediately came over, his eyes red, wanting to support my arm. Clara, you don't look well, let me help you go rest. His voice was hoarse, full of fatigue and sadness. I raised my hand and used all my strength to violently push his hand away. The force was so great that his body swayed uncontrollably. Don't touch me with your dirty hands. My voice was not loud, but it was like a stone thrown into a calm lake, making the surroundings instantly quiet. Everyone's eyes, full of curiosity and gossip, scanned back and forth between the two of us. A trace of humiliation and embarrassment flashed across Adrian's face, but it was quickly replaced by deeper sorrow. Clara, I know you blame me. You can hit me, scold me, just don't make yourself sick. Mom wouldn't be at peace in heaven. How ridiculous. What right did he have to mention my mother? He thought this was just an ordinary quarrel between husband and wife, which he could easily gloss over by lowering his posture. He didn't know that the moment he made that choice, all that was left between us was a sea of blood and deep hatred. What made me even more disgusted and nauseous was that Adrian's highly respected benefactor, the former President Victor, actually came with Serena. Serena had already had her bandages removed. The eyes that should have been in my mother's eye sockets were now clearly and brightly looking at the world. What beautiful eyes they were, black and white, full of watery light. She was wearing a white dress, her face full of hypocritical tears, looking pure and innocent. She walked up to me, opening her mouth timidly, her voice so weak it seemed like it could shatter at any moment. Clara, I'm sorry. I really didn't know this would happen. If I had known, I definitely wouldn't have. You wouldn't what? I looked at her and sneered, interrupting her clumsy performance. You wouldn't have stolen my mother's only hope of survival? Or would you have been comfortable using the eyes that should have belonged to her, to see this world? My questioning was like a sharp knife, peeling away her pitiful facade. Serena's face instantly turned white, and tears fell like broken beads, pattering down. I didn't mean to. I didn't know. She cried as she looked helplessly at her father and Adrian behind her, as if she had suffered a great injustice. Victor, standing nearby, stepped forward at the opportune moment, shielding his precious daughter behind him, and adopted the tone of a respected elder. Clara, I know you're not in a good mood right now, we all understand. But Serena is innocent, she's just a patient following doctor's orders. He paused, his eyes becoming meaningful, continuing with hidden meaning. Adrian is a good kid who values relationships. He did this for the sake of the bigger picture. Young people, don't be so unreasonable. Making too much of a scene and ruining Adrian's future won't benefit anyone. The bigger picture? The future? So, in the face of my mother's life, these were what they really cared about. So sacrificing my mother was the bigger picture they spoke of. The last bit of warmth in my heart disappeared, leaving only a cold wasteland. I looked at this pair of extremely hypocritical father and daughter, and then at Adrian, standing aside with a face full of struggle and pain. Good. So good. One of you plays the good cop, the other plays the bad cop, perfectly coordinated. I clenched my hand hidden in my pocket, my nails digging deeply into my palm, bringing a sharp sting. The pain kept me awake. Since you all think my mother's life is insignificant, then I'll let you taste what it's like to lose the things you cherish most. Adrian, don't you value your future and reputation the most? Victor, Don't you treasure your daughter the most? Serena, don't you most enjoy the feeling of being pampered? I won't let any of you off. I will make you all pay the most painful price for this. 3 days after the funeral, I didn't shed another tear. Sadness solves nothing. It only makes me seem weaker and more easily bullied. I carefully wiped my mother's portrait and placed it in the most prominent position in the living room. In the photo, my mother smiled gently, as if encouraging me. Mom, watch, your daughter will definitely get justice for you. I took a deep breath and walked out of the house. My counterattack has only just begun. The first stop was the bank. Adrian and I have a joint card, where all the large expenses and savings of the family are. I used our joint card to apply for a bank statement for the last month. When the teller handed me the statement, a sympathetic look lingered on me for a moment. Presumably, she had also seen the news in the past few days. I returned to the car and eagerly unfolded the paper. A clear transfer record appeared on the paper, piercing my eyes. The day before my mother's scheduled surgery, a huge sum of $300,000 was transferred from our joint account to a stranger's name. The recipient was Serena. $300,000. That was the surgery fee I had prepared for my mother, and the subsequent rehabilitation expenses, my savings from 5 whole years of scrimping and saving. Adrian not only stole the cornea, but also embezzled all of my mother's life-saving money, just to pay for the so-called exorbitant rehabilitation expenses for his mentor's daughter. Holding that thin bank statement, my hand trembled slightly, not because of sadness but because of anger. Adrian, you are truly loyal and righteous. Back home, I started rummaging through boxes and cabinets. Adrian thought I was just throwing a tantrum, and these past few days he had been trying every way to please me and make amends. He brought over chicken soup he had personally cooked today, and my favorite desserts tomorrow. I dumped them all into the trash can without hesitation, right in front of him. He sent me countless messages, his words filled with regret and pleading. He thought time could dilute everything, but he didn't know that I wasn't throwing a tantrum. I was looking for a knife that could completely overturn him, preventing him from ever recovering. Finally, in the depths of the old wardrobe in the study, filled with clutter, I found an old phone he had hidden away. This was the one he replaced 2 years ago, probably forgot to dispose of it, or perhaps thought I would never find it. I tried a few of our anniversaries as passwords, but they all showed as incorrect. I sneered and entered Serena's birthday. The phone screen, with a click, successfully unlocked. The phone was as clean as new, the contacts and text messages were cleared. There was only an encrypted album. The moment I opened the album, I felt the blood in my whole body congeal. Inside were hundreds of intimate photos of him and Serena. There were ones in front of the carousel at the amusement park. Serena was laughing like a child. There were ones on the beach at sunset, the two of them kissing passionately. There were even ones in his office. Serena wearing a white coat, sitting playfully on his desk, and him looking at her with doting eyes. The photos spanned a period of 2 years. The earliest one was taken shortly after we got married. So the so-called repaying of his mentor was just the most vile and disgusting cover for an affair. Under each photo, there was Adrian's sappy writing. My Serena, the most precious treasure in the world. Serena, don't be afraid, I will give you light, give you everything I can. I looked at those glaring photos one by one. My heart felt like it was being repeatedly hammered by a blunt instrument. The pain numbed me, and finally all that was left was overwhelming hatred. These days, Adrian was still sending me messages nonstop. Clara, I know I was wrong, can you give me one more chance? Clara, I made your favorite sweet and sour pork ribs. Come home for dinner tonight, let's talk properly. Looking at the extremely hypocritical words on the phone screen, and then looking at their glaring photos on the other phone, I felt an unbearable irony and disgust. I connected all the photos and bank statements to the printer and printed them out one by one. The printer made a whirring sound, as if it was blowing the horn of revenge for me. Adrian, you thought I only lost a mother. No, it is you who is going to lose everything. At 7 o'clock in the evening, the door lock turned. Adrian arrived home on time carrying an insulated container. He changed his shoes, a trace of cautious, flattering smile on his face. Clara, are you feeling better today? I stewed some pigeon soup for you, you try so. Before he could finish his words, His gaze fell on the coffee table in the living room. In the dim light, I sat quietly on this end of the sofa. Opposite me, there were several documents arranged neatly. The topmost one was written in bold, black letters, divorce agreement. The smile on his face instantly froze, like a cheap plaster mask. I ignored his astonishment, picked up the other two things on the table, and slammed them hard in front of him. The bank statements, and that large stack of disgusting and intimate photos, scattered like snowflakes at his feet. Adrian, take a good look at your deep affection and loyalty. He lowered his head in disbelief, picked up the photos, and flipped through them one by one. His face went from astonishment to shock to a deathly pale white. The hand holding the photos trembled violently, almost unable to hold the light pieces of paper. No. It's not like that, Clara, let me explain. He panicked, utterly panicked. I looked at him coldly, my voice without a trace of warmth. Sign. I pushed the divorce agreement and pen in front of him. Divorce and you leave with nothing. Furthermore, you will compensate my mother 1 million for emotional distress. As soon as I finished speaking, with a thump, Adrian, this man who was always proud and always high and mighty in front of me, knelt directly in front of me. He crawled towards me on his knees, clutching my pant leg tightly, his face smeared with tears and snot, looking pathetic, like a dog with a broken spine. Clara, I was wrong. I was really wrong. He cried and slapped himself hard on the face, making a smack, smack sound, his cheeks quickly swelling and turning red. Serena and I are in the past. We broke up a long time ago. The person I love is you, Clara. I was bewitched, I'm a bastard. I'm not human. I'll return the money to you. I'll return it to you right away. Please don't make a big deal out of this, don't get a divorce, okay? I coldly watched his undignified performance on the floor, like watching a jumping clown. If these confessions had been made before my mother passed away, I might have been slightly moved. But now it's too late. I picked up the pen and stuffed it into his hand. Now sign immediately. Seeing my resolute gaze, which left no room for turning back, the last glimmer of hope in his eyes was extinguished. His hand trembled as he took the pen. His whole body seemed to have been drained of energy, as if he was resigned to his fate. Just then, his phone rang inappropriately. The piercing ringtone sounded particularly abrupt in the deathly silent living room. The caller ID read, "Esteemed teacher." Adrian, as if grasping at the last straw, frantically pulled his phone out of his pocket and answered the call. On the other end of the phone, Victor's unquestionable voice, with a commanding tone, immediately came through. The voice was so loud that I could hear it clearly even without the speakerphone. Adrian, I don't care what method you use, you must stabilize Clara. Serena's future cannot have any blemishes, and our hospital's reputation cannot withstand any trouble. If this matter is exposed and affects Serena's reputation, your position as director, and even your entire career, will be over. You think carefully about it. The phone was hung up with a slap, and the room returned to deathly silence. The hand holding the pen was frozen in midair. He slowly raised his head and looked at me. His face was full of struggle, fear, and a hint of luck for his future and fame, which had just been rekindled by that phone call. Victor's words were like a basin of ice-cold water, instantly extinguishing the last bit of trembling remorse on Adrian's face. The fear and struggle in his eyes quickly faded, replaced by a coldness and calculation after being driven to the brink. He slowly stood up from the cold floor. He even patted the dust off his pants and straightened his messy collar, as if the person who had just been kneeling on the ground, slapping himself, and crying bitterly was not him at all. He put away that regretful face and looked at me with cold eyes, as if looking at an ungrateful enemy. Clara, don't push things too far. Leave a way out, and you might meet again in the future. At that moment, my heart felt like it had been thrown into a 10,000-year ice cave, completely dead. 1 second he was kneeling on the ground, tearfully repenting, and the next second, because of his esteemed teacher's threat, he could regain his confidence and even threaten me in return. This is the man I loved for 8 years. How pathetic, how laughable. The 300,000. I can treat it as a loan from the teacher. I will find a way to gather it and return it to you. There wasn't a trace of guilt in his tone anymore, only naked bargaining and threats. As if the 300,000 was just a loan he couldn't manage temporarily, Not the money meant to save my mother's life that he embezzled. But divorce is possible, leaving with nothing is not. He looked at me, a sneer curled on his lips, his eyes full of certainty and contempt. We are legally married, marital property is split in half, that's the law. If you insist on making a big deal out of this, then we'll see each other in court. When the time comes, if the photos are exposed, it's hard to say who will lose face more. He was sure I wouldn't dare. He was sure that I would compromise and back down for the sake of so-called reputation, for the sake of not making things unmanageable. He was sure that I was still the Clara he could manipulate and mold at will. Watching him, for the sake of self-preservation, for that illusory future and debt of gratitude, choose to abandon me again without hesitation. The last shred of hope in my heart was completely extinguished. I felt no anger, nor did I argue hysterically. I just calmly, one by one, collected the divorce agreement and those evidences on the table, carefully putting them into a file bag. These were all weapons to ruin his reputation. All right, Adrian. I raised my head, looked at him as if I was looking at a complete stranger. See you in court. I stood up, didn't look at him again, and turned to walk towards the door. As my hand touched the doorknob, I stopped and left him with one last sentence. I hope that when the time comes, your highly respected benefactor can still protect you like today. The door was gently closed by me, isolating his astonished and unpredictable face. Walking out of that home that I once regarded as a warm harbor, but now had become a cold cage. The air outside was fresher than ever. Adrian, you chose your future, your debt of gratitude. And I chose justice for my mother. From now on, there will be no sentimentality between us. Only a fight to the death. I didn't hesitate, nor did I leave myself any room for regret. The next morning, through a friend's introduction, I contacted the most famous lawyer in the city, Julian. He was known for handling divorce disputes and rights protection cases, calm, professional, and had never lost a case since he started practicing law. In the lawyer's office's spacious and bright reception room, I placed all the evidence in front of him, including bank statements, those intimate photos, and my mother's death certificate, one by one. I narrated the whole story in the calmest tone. No crying, no accusations. Julian listened quietly, the gaze behind his glasses sharp and steady, occasionally taking notes on the documents. After I finished speaking, he carefully read all the materials, then closed the folder and pushed up the gold-rimmed glasses on his nose. Miss Clara, please rest assured. His voice was steady and powerful, with a power to soothe people's hearts. I am 100% confident in this case. Not only will he leave with nothing, but I will also file a lawsuit against him for deliberately misappropriating property and indirectly causing the death of another person, so that he will pay the most painful legal price. With his professional guarantee, the heart that had been hanging for days finally landed back in its place. Thank you, Lawyer Julian. It's my job. He handed me a glass of warm water. Just leave the rest to me. Please take care of yourself. The temperature of that glass of water was just right, warmth spreading from my fingertips all the way to my heart. In the days leading up to the formal filing of the lawsuit and waiting for the court hearing, I did something more important. I organized all the evidence that Adrian had used to jump the queue for his mistress Serena to get a cornea transplant, embezzled $300,000 of my mother's surgery money, and had been cheating on me for 2 years during our marriage into a tearful accusation. I changed the title of the article again and again, and finally settled on A Daughter's Desperate Accusation. My mother died because of my husband's gratitude. Then, I used a newly registered email address to anonymously send it to several of the most influential media outlets and several online influencers with many fans. I didn't ask for a penny in return, I only had one request. Make a big deal out of it, the bigger the better, so that everyone would know Adrian's true face. Overnight, the bombshell I had personally dropped detonated in the entire city. The head of ophthalmology at the city hospital jumps the queue for love, mistress gets an eye transplant, forcing original wife's mother-in-law to her death. Where is medical ethics? The truth behind an 18-year-old girl snatching a dying old man's life-saving cornea. 300,000 yuan in life-saving money was embezzled by husband for mistress, who will take responsibility for this lost life. One shocking report after another spread and fermented like viruses on the internet. Intimate photos of Adrian and Serena, lightly pixelated, were plastered in conspicuous locations in all the articles. The public's anger was completely ignited. Countless netizens flooded the city hospital's official website and social media accounts, the comment sections instantly submerged in angry comments. The hospital's phones were ringing off the hook, all citizens demanding severe punishment for Adrian and an explanation for the deceased. The hospital's reputation suffered unprecedented damage. That afternoon, the city hospital couldn't withstand the pressure and issued an emergency announcement. The head of ophthalmology, Adrian, is immediately suspended and under investigation. I saw that announcement, and I also saw Victor frantically using all his connections to try to suppress the news. But he discovered that when an ordinary person's tragedy triggered the empathy of everyone, that overwhelming fire of public opinion was no longer something a retired former president could extinguish. Adrian's name became synonymous with everyone hits him, like a rat running across the street. I knew this was just the beginning. What I wanted was to ruin his reputation, flay him alive, and ensure he never had a chance to recover. The scandal snowballed, growing larger and larger, its heat refusing to dissipate. The matter soon alarmed the higher-level health authorities. A joint investigation team composed of disciplinary inspection departments and medical experts was quickly stationed at the city hospital, demanding a thorough investigation. The severity of the matter had far exceeded Victor's control. He keenly realized that if he didn't completely cut ties with Adrian, this fire would soon burn him and his most precious daughter, Serena. So this highly respected and with the kindness of a parent teacher, as Adrian called him, made the most sensible decision without hesitation. He proactively contacted the media and held a press conference. Under the focus of countless flashing lights, Victor wore a plain Zhongshan suit, his face filled with grief and indignation, like an innocent teacher betrayed by his student. He began by tearfully accusing Adrian, saying he was completely unaware of Adrian's personal behavior and was completely deceived by him. I never imagined that the student I nurtured, the student I was once most proud of, would do such a morally corrupt and conscienceless thing. He pounded his chest, old tears streaming down his face. He has betrayed my teachings, betrayed the hospital's trust, and betrayed the patient's entrustment. I am truly heartbroken. His superb acting moved many reporters at the scene. Then he changed the subject and began to do everything he could to clear himself and his daughter. As for my daughter Serena, she is even more of an innocent victim. She is just a patient who simply followed the arrangements of her attending physician. She had no idea that there was such a heartbreaking story behind that cornea. Adrian took advantage of our trust, took advantage of his authority as director, concealed information, and that's why today's tragedy occurred. Finally, he bowed to the camera with righteous indignation, expressing that the hospital would fully cooperate with the investigation, severely punish Adrian, this scourge of the industry, and give Clara's mother justice. He pushed all the responsibility away, as if he wasn't the one who threatened Adrian on the phone with his future and reputation, ordering him to stabilize Clara. Adrian watched this press conference through a live internet broadcast in the apartment where he was temporarily staying after being suspended. He was completely dumbfounded. On the screen, the teacher he had always respected, admired, and even sacrificed my mother's life to repay, was attacking him with the most vicious words, portraying him as an unforgivable sinner. He couldn't believe that Victor would not hesitate to push him out as the sole scapegoat to protect his and his daughter's reputation. He had become the only sinner in this overwhelming storm. Nailed to the pillar of shame, bearing everyone's condemnation and anger. He wanted to call Victor and ask him why he did this to him, but he discovered that his number had already been blacklisted. He wanted to rush out and confront them, but he was too afraid to show his face because of the reporters surrounding the building downstairs. Deserted by everyone. Betrayed. This was the big picture and future he desperately tried to maintain. Now he had personally destroyed everything I had, and he had been destroyed by the person he trusted most. Truly, what goes around comes around. Under immense public pressure and the intervention of an investigative team from higher authorities, more and more truths were peeled back, layer by layer, and surfaced. An evaluation team comprised of authoritative medical experts re-evaluated and consulted on Serena's entire medical history. The results were shocking. Serena's eye condition was a chronic corneal disease. While it did carry the risk of blindness, it was nowhere near the point of requiring immediate corneal transplantation. Her condition was slowly progressing, and could have been effectively controlled with medication, allowing her to patiently wait in line for a suitable donor. The reason she was able to jump the line, disregard the queuing system, and steal my mother's cornea was entirely due to Victor leveraging his former hospital director authority and connections to pressure Adrian in private. And Serena herself was not the pure and innocent, knowing nothing girl her father portrayed her to be. Investigators recovered a large amount of deleted information from Adrian's call records and messaging apps. The information revealed that Serena had been constantly exaggerating her condition, exploiting Adrian's affections for her and his guilt toward Victor. She played the victim in front of Adrian, talking about how afraid she was of going blind and how much she longed to see the light. It was she, selfishly and deliberately, who instigated Adrian, step by step, to steal my mother's last chance to see the world. When this detailed investigation report was officially released to the public, Adrian's spirit completely collapsed. It turned out that the gratitude and love he had staked everything on to maintain were a meticulously planned, complete and utter scam from beginning to end. He had been played like a puppet by that hypocritical father and daughter. Like a maddened beast, he rushed out of his apartment, ignoring the pursuing reporters, and drove frantically to Victor's villa. Victor. Serena. Come out here. Why did you lie to me? Why did you do this to me? He roared frantically outside the door, slamming his body against the closed, ornate iron gate. The response he received was two strong security guards Victor had summoned. He was pinned to the ground by the two guards, beaten and kicked, like a stray dog that had wandered into the yard. He was powerless to resist, and could only allow the blows to rain down on him. Victor stood by the window on the second floor, wearing a silk robe, holding a glass of red wine, coldly watching everything that was happening downstairs. His eyes held no hint of emotion, as if he were looking at a piece of garbage that had nothing to do with him. Adrian was beaten black and blue, his body covered in wounds, but he felt no pain. He lay on the cold ground, staring at the indifferent window, and suddenly began to laugh hysterically. His laughter was more hideous than crying. He had lost his job, his reputation, and was burdened with insurmountable public debt and legal liabilities. He had abandoned his family and caused the death of his mother-in-law, only to be used and discarded like a worn-out shoe by that father and daughter. Everything he cherished, every sacrifice he had made, ultimately turned out to be a huge joke. His life had been completely destroyed by his own hand. The court's verdict came down quickly. On the day of the hearing, Adrian, Victor, and Serena all attended as defendants. Faced with lawyer Julian's clear and logical presentation, and the mountain of irrefutable evidence, Adrian had no room to struggle. He had committed adultery during his marriage, maliciously transferred marital assets, and bore undeniable indirect responsibility for his mother-in-law's death. Victor, for abusing his power and violating medical regulations, was equally culpable. Although Serena did not face direct legal sanctions, she and her father's actions had been forever nailed to the pillar of moral shame. The court ultimately ruled that Adrian and I would divorce. Adrian would leave with nothing. Furthermore, he would have to pay 1 million yuan in mental distress compensation to my mother. The day after the verdict took effect, the city hospital officially issued a notice dismissing Adrian. The health department also simultaneously issued a notice revoking his medical license. He had gone from a respected ophthalmologist, a promising department director, to a disgraced, destitute outcast. After the verdict was handed down, he came to find me. He knelt rigidly in front of my newly rented apartment building, neither eating nor drinking. He looked 20 years older than he had just days before, his hair streaked with gray, his beard unshaven, his eyes empty and lifeless, with none of his former charm. He slapped himself repeatedly, his forehead bleeding as it hit the rough concrete. "Clara, I'm sorry to you, I'm sorry to Mom. You can ask me to do anything. I just beg you to let me see you one more time. I really know I was wrong." His cries attracted the pointing fingers and hushed whispers of the surrounding neighbors. I stood by the window, coldly watching the humble figure downstairs, and drew the curtains. Julian called, his voice filled with concern, asking if I wanted to call the police. Holding the phone, I walked to the door and, separated by the cold security door, only said one sentence. "Adrian, my mom isn't coming back." The crying outside the door stopped abruptly. A few seconds later, what followed was a wail more desperate and heartbreaking than before. He knelt for 3 days and 3 nights, until he finally collapsed from exhaustion, and was taken away by an ambulance that arrived. I never saw him again after that. I quickly sold that wedding apartment full of unpleasant memories, and with Adrian's compensation money, I bought a quiet little house near my mother's grave. Throughout the entire process, Julian stayed by my side, helping me handle various complicated legal documents and follow-up matters. He didn't say much, but he always appeared when I needed him most. He would silently help me sort all the documents into categories. He would silently hand me a glass of warm water when I was staring blankly at my mother's portrait. His calmness and thoughtfulness, like a ray of warm sunlight, shone into my long-frozen heart, melting the hardest corner. Life seemed to be slowly moving in a good direction. 1 year later, I used that compensation money to establish a charitable foundation in my mother's name, called Qinghui. Qing is my name, and Hui represents sunshine and hope. The foundation specializes in providing medical assistance to patients with eye diseases, like my mother, who may lose their sight due to the inability to pay for expensive surgery. Julian kept his promise and became the foundation's pro bono legal advisor. On the day of the unveiling ceremony, the sun was just right, warm but not dazzling. Standing on the small podium, looking at the hopeful and grateful eyes below, I felt a sense of peace and fulfillment I had never experienced before. "Mom, can you see this? Your kindness is bringing light to more people in another way." After the ceremony, Julian walked to my side and handed me a bottle of water, the cap already loosened by him. He looked at me gently, the smile in his eyes like crushed starlight. He said softly, "Aunt Helen will be proud of you in heaven." I turned to look at him, against the light. His handsome profile was outlined particularly softly. I smiled, the most relaxed and heartfelt smile of the year. "Thank you, Julian. You've been with me all this way." He smiled too, his eyebrows and eyes curved, like a spring breeze brushing across the lake. "My pleasure." Later, I heard about Adrian's ending from a friend. He was sent to a sanatorium because of mental breakdown. It is said that he doesn't talk to anyone every day, just repeats a sentence in the ward over and over again. "Mom, I was wrong. I'll give you back your eyes. Give them back to you." When I heard this news, I didn't feel anything, just calmly turned a page of the foundation's application documents. Some people, once they go down the wrong path, never have a chance to turn back. His life has fallen into the abyss, while my life has just begun. Another half-year passed, and on an ordinary afternoon Julian proposed to me. No flowers, no grand ceremony, only a simply designed ring and his extremely sincere eyes. "Clara, I know you've been through a lot of pain. I hope that your future can have me involved. I can't guarantee to make you happy every day, but I promise to always put you and your family first in my life." I looked at him, at the firmness and affection in his eyes, my eyes gradually becoming wet. I nodded vigorously, reaching out my hand to him. Our wedding was simple, with only a few of our closest friends invited. My mother's portrait was placed in the most conspicuous position, and in the photo, she was smiling gently and kindly. When exchanging rings, Julian whispered in my ear, "Actually, I secretly hid a photo of you." It was the day you established the foundation. You smiled particularly beautifully on stage, so I had a reporter friend help me take a picture. It's in our new home now, kept together with our marriage certificate. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass of the church, falling on us, warm and bright. Life always has to go through bone-chilling wind and rain before seeing the most beautiful rainbow. The deceased are gone, but the living must carry on. My road has only just begun. Ahead of me, there is only light.